So I want to take a minute to try and tell my story. Um, I grew up in San Diego, a middle class family, one of those kind of white picket fence type neighborhoods where all the kids, would play and, you know, you come in when the street light turned on and, have a little football, you know, street games. And I spent a lot of days just playing and playing. Um, had a lot of good memories from my youth and upbringing. I had a very loving family. My mom and dad were married for my entire childhood. They each showed me a lot of love. I was always very well taken care of, and I got to experience a lot of great things. I never had any traumatic events or anything bad happen. Um, they would both take me to different things. I played a lot of sports, little league. Um, we'd go to the beach. We had a little river house that we would go on vacation to. So yeah, I mean, when I think back about my childhood, I have nothing negative to say about it. I don't think you could have asked for a better situation or upbringing. My dad was in construction, so I spent a lot of time in the construction yard, learning a lot of different things, how to fix things, how to do things, how to work hard. That was a big thing that's always stuck with me. Was work ethic was a very important thing in my family. You you got up and you went to work for what you needed to provide for yourself and your family. It was something that was just always a thing. And so, um, despite my dad, being in construction and and his dad running the construction company, they were always pushing. I was pushed to go to college, and so that was sort of the path that I was following. Did really well in school, got straight A's most of the time throughout high school. Ended up going to college, and I took 5 years there. Got a degree in biology, and let me just step back a minute from there. So at this point, I'm in high school, and I wasn't really. Despite my parents that drank, I actually was sort of turned off by drinking. I didn't really care, to actually ever drink at that time. I actually didn't like it. Just saw some of the negatives about it, and I didn't, want to. I wasn't interested in trying to, get into it or anything like that. And it also helped that my friends in high school and an older friend I looked up to and hung out with a lot in the neighborhood. His family and him did not drink at all. So um, the people that I was hanging around at that time, they wasn't something we did. We went and had fun. We went bowling. We did all kinds of things. But we never were after sneaking drinks or doing things or getting to parties or any of that. So in senior year, I met my current wife, and we have basically been inseparable ever since. It was just she was my first and only girlfriend, and we are still together to this day. That was back in 2000, and she also went to college. And so we basically I ended up having my first drink, like, I want to say I was maybe maybe late 18, maybe even 19 years old, and enjoyed it, and we had fun. It wasn't, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. It was social, and it was school, and it felt good. And um, and at that time, I would, as I got older, I started, being around more like the party scene, obviously in college. Started really taking a liking to it, and we would go to school, go to our classes, do our stuff, and then we would, party. Very, very typical, very stereotypical college situation. A lot of drinking, a lot of fun. And me and my wife were always on the move. I'd look for the next concert we could go to. We probably went to 30, 40 concerts at least, and we'd get a room so we could drink and drink before the concert, drink after the concert, and drink in the concert. We planned trips. We did, spring break trips, down to Mexico, and we really had a blast. And we, I was always overdoing it even then. Like I always had to be the last one standing. Like just or the first one to start. Always had to pre-drink before everything. I couldn't just go to something, drink there, and go home. It was always a pre-drink, during drink, and post-drink for me. It's just how I was built, and that's how I handled it. And it was very all or nothing for me when it came to drinking. During that time, it's a little more forgiving because you're young and you don't have children, and it's sort of expected. You're in college, you party, like no one's too hard on you. Everybody kind of just thinks you're just just having fun and doing your thing, and you'll grow out of it, and like most people tend to do. And so we waited till after college to get married. Actually, on purpose. We didn't want to kind of have that distract us. We just want to focus on school, make sure we both got our degrees, and do that. So we actually waited, and we got married, and my wife became a teacher right out of school, and I did not go right into what I had initially pursued, which was pre-dental, pre-medical type stuff. So I ended up kind of floating for a few months, ended up doing some substitute teaching in high school, and then I, at that point, that's right about then is when we ended up having my first daughter, and relatively normal health-wise as far as you could see. She looked normal. Everything had all of her fingers and toes. Nothing surprising. Nothing would have led you to believe that there was anything wrong with her. And we didn't start noticing that by the time we started noticing that she was having some milestone issues, she was late to crawl, she was late to walk, and at that time it had already been 2 years, and we had our second child, and the milestone for the older daughter continued to not be met. She still wasn't walking, and we're pushing 3 years, 3.5 years, and then we started, of course, being very concerned and started looking for answers, and it actually took us almost 2 years to find an answer. So at that point, we finally got the answer, and it turned out they were both born with mitochondrial disease, specifically NARP and ARP, and there is a whole host of issues that come along with that diagnosis. So for one, they have developmental delays, essentially special needs. There's a lot of things that, probably they'll never do, like math, reading and writing, are very long shot things. There could have been some stuff at that time we didn't know, but there's some speech impediment stuff, speech issues that go along with that. A lot of the things that come with developmental delays, and things even like a lot of stuff, just even like feeding themselves, fine motor skills, reaction times, a lot of that stuff is delayed or different. In addition, they are also both disabled, so they have never walked. They're age 17 and 15 now, and they have not walked independently ever in their lives. And that is something that is actually just like a muscle tone issue. They're not paralyzed. Their legs move and they have strength, so they can push you away or push with their legs. But there's a tone issue that doesn't allow them to have like a sense of gravity. So when they're trying to stand there, their muscles don't tone up, or they don't tell the knees to lock up or to tense up to keep them supported. So they end up just, their legs just bend and collapse and fall, and they kind of fall to the ground. So those were some of the immediate things, that we dealt with. And upon this news, of getting the diagnosis explained to us, another thing that they told us is that they have a shortened life expectancy, which means that, they actually only had like one reference point of a person in the database that was 19 years old. They had no one that they really knew that many of that had NARP and were over 18 years old. And in a lot of cases with mitochondrial disease, and NARP specifically, a lot of them don't make it past certain ages. So if they make it to 5, it's a big deal. If they make it to 8, it's a big deal. If they make it to 12, etc. So it was pretty heavy news. Basically the idea that they're just going to grow old like most people, assuming no freak accidents or things like that, was just not something that seemed to be in their forecast. And so, that immediately changes sort of your perspective on how you go about, providing a life for them. And that's what it was. And, they seemed healthy at the time. So, that in the back of your head, but, you hadn't really experienced anything, or we hadn't experienced anything that made us feel like that was the case, until, the years passed. And we had a lot of episodes where they would get a cold or a flu, like the general cold or flu that most kids would take a day or two to get over. They'd spike a fever, they'd have a runny nose, maybe an earache, and then they get over it, and then they go back to their day. And with both daughters, they would get one of these colds or flus, and they would have a really hard time with it, and they would struggle for multiple days. Many times we would have to get them to Children's Hospital, check them in, get them on hydration. And then what would end up happening is their body would have a metabolic response or metabolic crash type situation, and their lactic acid levels would rise. And just for reference, I think, and my numbers might be off here, but the average adult, our average person's lactic acid is running like around 0.5, and when they would get sick, theirs would be in the 3 to, anywhere from 2 to 3 to even 4 sometimes, as a range. And what made things extra tense and scary is that when your lactic acid, I think, is above 7, you're basically looking at death. So of course, we're in the hospital and we're monitoring her lactic acid every 2 to 3 hours and watching it go from 3 to 3.6 to 4 to 4.2. And of course, you get nervous that we're starting to get into a threshold that gets very, very dangerous. And there were a lot of times in the hospital that were very terrible and scary, for us. And again, this wasn't just a once. It wasn't just a once in a, one-time thing. I mean, this would happen every winter from the months of about October into April, when flu season was heavy, cold season was heavy. Obviously, the coronavirus and COVID and all that was an extra intense time for us because, of course, it was high alert for everybody, and so it was extra for us. But that was how people lived in COVID, was how we were living our whole lives with them, trying to protect them, trying to wipe down every surface, and not be around crowds, and try and keep them away. But yeah, we did this for I can't even think how many years, and it only got better as of 18 months ago, and I'll come back to that. But so yeah, we spent two or three times a year down at Children's Hospital. Stays anywhere from 3 days to 7 or 8 days, and that was just something that became very expected. We would go away in the summer to our vacation place. We'd have a great time, and then we'd go back to school, and then we'd gear up. And a lot of times, in some of the earlier years, we'd yank them out of school. We'd pull them out like in October, and they'd stay home with me, for 3 months, and then we put them back at school when the cold and flu season got cleared up. So we had to do a lot of non-typical schedule things, which let me circle back, to just give you that background on them. So we, when they were, I don't know what the ages were at this time, maybe, I don't know, maybe 6 to 8, 5 to 7, somewhere in there. You know, we were also struggling financially, and so I had went back to work. And during this time when we were finding out this diagnosis and everything that was going on, I was going to work every day, and we were actually dropping my girls off with my mom at 5:30 in the morning, and she had to watch them until one of us got home from work, and she did that for us for a minimum 2 years, might have been longer, probably longer. But I know that was our routine, and it was very taxing on everybody, and very difficult. So in 2016, I got laid off from my job, and little did I know, it getting kicked out of the rat race and being forced to evaluate things ended up being a massive blessing for me, and I think for my family. But at that point, it only made sense for me to go to full-time caretaking for my girls and handle the situation at home. They were just getting heavier and heavier, getting harder to maneuver around the house, getting harder to change diapers, getting harder to do everything. And my mom was it was obviously too much. It's actually a lot for anybody. That really doesn't matter who you are. It's just a lot. With the two of them, all manageable if your head's in the right spot. But we made that choice, and I've never went back to a traditional job since, and that was in the very end of 2016, and so at that point we started, I started doing that, and all the while in the background, I had evolved into a daily drinker. Sort of, I was in the HVAC business, something that I just, between college, kind of brought up with a work hard, play hard mentality. It was very common, where I was, and how my situation was and everything, that you would go to work, and then you would have beers in the afternoon, and that was an automatic. Didn't matter if you had kids or not. Didn't matter if your kids had special needs or not, or disabled, or whatever it was. That was something that was very standard, and again, part of the just, it was an automatic. But as you develop tolerance, you can handle more, and then you end up, you're not just having 3 or 4 beers, it becomes 6 beers, is your minimum fill to kind of get that buzz and get that feeling you're looking for of relaxation, and kind of just to take the edge off a bit, and that 6 turns into 8, and you end up having your tolerance builds up, and you end up needing more to get to the same place that you were trying to get to, and that's sort of the beginning, of addiction, and where you start building that system up, that protocol, or that regimen up, where you get used to a certain time of day when your body's telling you you're gonna need to start having some drinks here, or else you're gonna start feeling withdrawal type symptoms and not want and not have a very good evening. You're going to get a headache. You're not going to feel very good, and you're going to be happy. You're going to be in a shitty mood, and it's going to make it harder to get through your evening if you're all irritated. Um, and so it just became a very normal thing, and automatic. And then the weekends would be increased drinking because it was the weekend and you didn't have to get up, and the kids could sleep in, and my wife was home, so I was like officially off duty for a couple days because my wife was there to kind of handle the load, which of course that's shitty for her that she works all week and that her weekends were spent taking care of them because I was sleeping longer, I'd be hungover, or I had my other priorities, and so we went on like this for years, and actually all this was happening in a 400 square foot guest house behind my parents' house because that was all that we could afford. We had gotten ourselves into a lot of debt. We weren't making a lot of money. Prices in San Diego to buy a home were already getting high. You had to have a significant down payment. We couldn't even keep up with our credit card bills, let alone saving to try and come up with that down payment. And so we basically we were kind of stuck, and we were in this guest house, and it was a basic studio. It was a granny flat. It was built for one older woman to come stay a couple nights to visit the family, and we were living in it day in and day out with the four of us. And when COVID hit, we got to come down to our little place that my grandpa had put at this river, on this little strip of river, and it had an old 1956 single wide trailer there for probably 35 years, and that's what we used to come to on our a couple weekends a year we'd get away. And when COVID happened, we made some arrangements with my dad, and we ended up putting a new trailer on here, and that's actually where I'm at the moment filming this, and we got to come live down here as a family, and experience kind of what it was like to have a little bit of a home, multiple bedrooms, and they weren't all attached in one room. We had a separate bedroom, we had a separate kitchen, and we got a little taste of what it was like to have a place to call our own, and one thing that I had done in late 2017, I got into crypto, and I used to get up in the mornings before my girls would wake up, and I would go dabble in that and try and learn how to be a part of that, invest in that, and I ended up sticking with it. And in 2021, this is kind of after the remnants of COVID, and we had moved back home, and I had done well enough in crypto that I was able to get enough money to put it down on our home, and we ended up getting a new home, and all the while from, let's see, what was it? I want to say 2019 to 2022. There was 3 years there of, where the drinking had gotten to a point where, it was getting out of hand. It was very clear. Me and my wife were arguing a lot. We were drifting further and further apart, never on the same page. It really became a cat and mouse thing where she didn't want me to drink anymore, and I kept fighting it. I kept insisting that I was fine. I kept, I'd take some time off. I'd take 4 or 5 days off, and then, then trying to make her happy, essentially, or trying to make things right, like kind of like it's the doghouse. I was in the doghouse. I was trying to get out of the doghouse, and we played that game for many years, and it ended up causing a massive strain, as you'd imagine, on the marriage. And we, it just became a thing. It's just, I, I wanted to drink. She didn't want me to. I started hiding it. I tried to play it off. I tried to do everything I could to get my drinking in and to not, get in trouble by her. So all of these early attempts and trying to, not drink as much, we're just trying to, make things okay in the household. And, so we got to a point where, we just kept having big issues. I'd leave the house for a day or two, then I'd say I'm sorry. I say I'm gonna fix things, and she'd give me another chance. And again, we had my daughters, and they needed someone there. They needed someone full time. They needed someone to take care of them. And believe it or not, being their dad and caring and loving them, I was the best person for the job, despite, whenever I, didn't have them, I would be drinking heavily, but when I did have them, I did take good care of them, and I did, meet their needs, and probably better than, the average hired person or something was going to do for them at that time. But we got to a point, at this point, I'm, my wife's working still, I'm caretaking for them. And this must have been, I want to say we're all the way here now in 2022. And I want to say it was probably at sometime in 2021 or something. I finally admitted that I had a problem and it needed to be addressed, and I agreed to go to rehab. And that was a big step. That was the first time I finally took responsibility and said that I have a problem. Before, it was years of denial and trying to sugarcoat and pretend that I didn't have a problem. I just thought everyone else had a problem. Very, very, very stereotypical. A lot of my story about the drinking is very stereotypical. All of the signs, all of the things, denial, and I don't have a problem. Everybody else is fucked up. Everybody else doesn't know what's going on. They just don't get it, and I get a pass from a lot of people because of my daughters. Like they'd see how I acted. They'd see me at a party. They'd see me being, obviously, intoxicated at places I shouldn't be intoxicated, like kids' birthday parties or charity events, or but they would always give me this pass because of my girls, and it's like they felt so bad for my situation that, like, well, he's got the girls, and he's, so it's understandable. And you look back and it's not it. I mean, if you want to point to a trigger or something to cope with, I guess you could put it on them if you want to do that. But when you look back, and it's like, it was never acceptable. It was never an okay reason. Is there ever an okay reason to be an alcoholic, or a full-scale alcoholic, a justified reason? I mean, there's reasons why you might have turned into one, or you might be one, but those aren't valid excuses to be one, in my opinion. And so, what really ramped things up when it came to the alcoholism was after admitting that I had a problem and then trying to fix the problem. That's when the real serious struggles began. And that's when, before, there was no such thing as relapse, technically, because it was just me trying to get out of the doghouse for 3 or 4 days, and then I'd be drinking again. So, it was like, oh yeah, like, that was expected. Like, of course you're drinking again. It's only been 3 days. Like, I wouldn't expect anything else from you. That was just the way it was. But once I actually went to rehab, came out of there thinking I was cured, and 3 months it went by. When I drank again, that was a relapse. That was, oh wow, I am drinking again, and I never thought I was going to be. And once that happened, then it was trying to figure out where to go from there. And I basically had to try and start not drinking for real again. And so I would come up with a new plan, and then I would go a certain amount of time, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then I would drink again. And then I get in trouble. I say get in trouble, but at this point, we would just have a blowout, and we'd have a big argument, all about the alcohol, all about, I thought you, figured this out. I thought you changed. You told me all these things. I thought we were okay. And, no, I was back at it again, And, again, very stereotypical. What ended up happening is the relapses got more intense. They got longer. It wasn't a 1 or 2 day bender. It would be a 4-day bender. And then it would be a 6-day bender. And to where my last one was 10 to 12 days of nonstop drinking, almost zero eating. There's a good 5 days easy in those 10 to 11 days that I don't remember the days. I don't remember what happened during those days. It was an absolute blur of time in my life. Like, I can't recall what occurred over a 5-day span on my very last bender. And so, as it progressively got worse and the relapses became more intense, and I got more verbally aggressive, I started getting, more violent. I remember, just taking a sledgehammer to a table in the garage, just to demonstrate how pissed off I was. And, it just got more intensified, and worse. And then, with the amplified drinking was amplified aftermath, meaning that when I finally decided to try again, I had to go through some serious withdrawal episodes. Some of the very, very brutal nightmare, waking up in sweats, thinking you might not make it through the night, kind of shit. And I did that cold turkey a handful of times. And it was fucking scary, and it was, not only that, it was super dangerous. And, if I'm supposed to be the provider and the one taking care of my daughters and giving them the life that they need in their shortened life, and I'm sitting there thinking I might not make it through the night because of what I just did for the last 5 days. I might have a seizure, I might die, I might not wake up, and of course that wasn't enough to deter me from doing it all over again 3 weeks down the line. But that was just, that's just part of the addiction. You got a real short memory. When it comes to these things, you remember that first drink. You don't remember the nightmares and the sweats. And it's amazing what you choose, what your mind chooses to remember about, the entire prior experience from a month before. So you allow yourself to go through it all over again. And to bring, to pretty much bring me to the end of the addiction part of it. Well, I guess not the end. Addiction is kind of with you forever, but kind of the end of the story with alcohol for me is during that final bender, right before, we basically, like I said, it was before or after the 10 days. I'm having trouble thinking specifically of when the conversation happened, but I do know that I was coherent, and I was buzzed, but I was coherent, and meaning that, at that exact time, I meant what I said, because I really thought about it, and I really gave up, officially. And the conversation that took place in a very calm manner was basically my wife just accepting who I was going to be. Like she was done fighting for me to be different. And so we just had a conversation about it. And, again, we met in high school and we were best friends, and, we shared everything about our lives, for 20 something years. And she just sat down and said, like, is this what you want to do? And I basically I thought about it, and I just said, yeah, I think so. Like, this is, I think, the life that I'm going to end up just living, regardless if I want to or not, and she didn't necessarily agree with that, whether I wanted to or not. But she just said, okay, well, I'm not going to make the choice for you. I'm gonna let you make the decision. And she's like, but I want you to just be very clear with me and just tell me to my face right now. And she asked me the question. She said, you're telling me you want to choose a life of alcohol over a life with me and your daughters? And I sat there for a minute and I said, yes, that's what I'm gonna do, because I don't want to fight this anymore. I can't beat it. I've been trying for 2 years to beat it, and I can't. Like, I've tried every way I can think of to beat this thing, and I just keep failing, and I just keep finding my way back to it. And I think it's just better if I just accept it. Like, it's going to be better for me in my life, and probably better for you and the daughter and the girls, if we just accept it for what it is and quit trying to all fight it together and just figure out how we're going to work with it. And so she said, okay, like, the decision's yours. Like, I'm not going to ask you to try anymore either. Like, I'm done. I'm done trying to get you to figure it out, to have you figure it out, to help you figure it out. Like, it's in your hands, and I'm gonna start making arrangements on my end for how we're gonna proceed without you, in our lives every day. And so we came, and I just said, well, what about the girls? Like when, I still want to see them. I still want to be a part of their life. And she said, that's fine. I will, if you can pass a breathalyzer test in front of me, then I'll let you spend some time with them. If you can't, you can't. And that's the only way it's going to happen. She's like, I don't want to keep you from them, like, they're still your daughters, and I know you care about them and love them. And I said, okay, well, that's the plan. So I'm gonna move out. I'm gonna move over here with my parents, and I'm gonna drink. And whenever if we make arrangements to see them, I'll make sure I pass the breathalyzer, and then we'll go from there. And we said, okay. It was like we basically shook hands and said, okay, and we'll discuss divorce or our situation later, or what that looks like. But for now, this is the plan. And I said, okay. And I want to say that happened, honestly, before the 10 days. I'm pretty sure I felt in my mind that I had to clear and I had nothing to worry about, so I just proceeded to get drunk for 10 days straight. And then, very interesting thing happened. I was sitting alone at my parents' house. My wife was down with my daughters at the river place, and a friend of mine sent me a video. It's an hour-long video by Brandon Novak, and I watched it start to finish, and for whatever reason, it just resonated with me tremendously. And that switch, that like flip, went off in my head, and I basically had 180'd on everything I had just told my wife about how I wanted to proceed with my life. And I texted her after the video, or I think the next morning, and I said, you know what? I know we've already kind of made decisions and everything, but I'm going to quit alcohol for good. And I'm going to do it for myself. I said it's pretty clear. I can't do it for you. I cannot do it for our daughters. But I want to do this for myself, and I don't care what happens. I don't care what happened. I don't care what anyone that I've ever known has to say about it. I don't care where, you know, I'm no longer afraid of what's on the other end if I decide to give up alcohol forever. I'm not leaving any doors open. I'm closing every single one of them, and I'm gonna try and live a life without alcohol. And so the next morning, I actually attended a SMART meeting. There's a group that I used to go to on Sundays, the same group that I used to go to because my wife wanted me to, and then I would have a beer within 5 minutes of exiting the meeting. I did that probably 5 times after these Sunday meetings, truly solidifying that I was not there for myself. I was only there because someone else wanted me to be there. But I went down to this meeting, and I actually went for myself, and I told them that I was actually there for myself for the first time after being there for 10 times. And I told them the absolute truth. I said, guys, for the last 5 times that I've been here, I literally went to the parking lot over there after, and I opened a beer and drank the entire thing after sitting in this recovery meeting. And so it was pretty clear that, like, I was not here for the right reasons, but today I am. And I went to a handful of them after those meetings. They helped me from when I needed them. And that video, at the time, had I gotten the wrong video, could be sitting in a very different place. But that particular video, at the state I was in, I was very physically weak. I was mentally weak. And I needed that compassion type, empathy type video of someone who had just been through hell and back with their addiction and came out on the other end. And 2 weeks after that, like 2 or 3 weeks probably, at this point I had got some nutrition in me. I started getting some rest. I had gotten past the withdrawals and got, started getting, the heavy part of the alcohol out of my system, and it took a good 7 days to just start feeling halfway normal at that point. And but by 3 weeks, getting hydrated and getting nutrition and getting a little bit of exercise in, I had already kind of came to a better place in general, mentally and physically. And that same friend, believe it or not, sent me another video, and this is a very different type of video. This video was a guy that was yelling through the screen at me to get my shit together, quit being a bitch, and man up and start thriving, to drop all the vices and to essentially build the best version of myself, and share that with my family and eventually others. And that lit a fire under me that is still lit to this day. And from that video led me to more of that person's videos that got me looking into social media, got me looking into Instagram, YouTubes, and started me on a massive transformation journey that has had amazing results. A lot of growth has occurred in a lot of ways. Obviously, physical, fitness is something that naturally can play into recovery, and it's something that has worked for me. It has been something that I found important. I found that it works for me. That one thing that I've told this to many people, that when I was trying to get sober and I would go to meetings and I would watch things or see things, see videos, and see examples of people who had gotten sober, and all these, and even some family people that I knew, some remote, some side family members who had gotten sober 20 years prior. I saw how they lived, or I kind of, I listened to their stories and I listened to what they did every day, and it was for me, it was very undesirable, very depressing, very uneventful and exciting, and honestly, not the kind of person that I ever wanted to be or become. And so I I often told myself, if that's what life is after, if you quit drinking, then I don't want it. I don't want that life. So I'm not going to stop drinking, because that's apparently what that leads to. Very naive thinking. I mean, those people are their own person, and you know, they live their lives their own way. But again, it wasn't making me run to the exit door for, you know, and stopping alcohol, because of like that was the example of life after the fact, and no thank you. And so what social media brought to me, that I had not known or seen before, was a, a whole group of men from all over the place who drop their vices and then turn their lives into amazing stories and lives. Whether that they were jacked, just had, were super lean, just fit, just looked, physically healthy and full of life, whether it be that, or, I was also a lifestyle chaser, still am to some extent, the nice cars, and, the having things, having the money, having the freedom, where they get up every day and they're able to focus on the things that they want to focus on. And I started getting examples of sober people out there crushing it and killing it. And again, that it lit a fire, and it was something that was so new to me but so exciting, because I didn't know this existed, honestly. And I mean, I can seriously, like, I thank social media to this day for showing me, for people putting stories out there and sharing how they went from this and now they're doing this, and gave me, examples and leads to follow of something to pursue. That, hey, I quit drinking, but like, that's just the start of the story. Like, like life this when shit gets fun, shit can get interesting. There's 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 a lot of there's so much life to live. Everybody does it different, but that's what I was attracted to. And honestly, if I would have if I would have only seen video one, I may have found myself creeping back into it, because I would have maybe found myself, I don't know, going to, maybe just like meetings, and just listening to people who had a different approach to it, and had a different need in their day to stay sober, and not a knock to anybody who needs to do what they need to do to stay sober. I mean, more power to them. That's their thing. But the idea of chalking down, X's on the calendar, and celebrating they made it through another day, was just not something that was attractive to me. Being able to say, I got sober and I got in the best shape of my life, and I run a very successful business that I always wanted to run, but I could never pull off until I got sober, and now I do, and now I make a lot of money, and I get to do the things I want to do, and with my family, and it's a result of getting sober and getting my life on track. That's what I found attractive, and so it gave me something to go off of, and so I'm just like forever appreciative that, like, that technology exists, that gave me that, that idea of a future, that could be for me as well. So To, you know, uh, t- and there was no official, like, contract signed with my wife or anything. Like, again, we had made a decision of how we were going to proceed, and I don't think that's what she wanted. I don't think it's what I wanted. Um, I think it was just the best solution we could come up with at the time based on the current situation. And essentially, I just started showing up every day. Um, no promises were made. I wasn't going to go there because I had been making promises for 15 years that I just kept breaking. So I didn't lay out a list of promises that I was going to do this and I wasn't going to drink, and I just simply said, I've decided not to drink anymore and I want something different for my life. And I really hope that as a result of this, that you and the girls can benefit in some way. Um, I hope I can provide and do the things that I could have been and should have been doing all along, in the way that they should have been done. And and you know, if anybody's ever being honest about recovery and quitting, and doing that, there there is a little honeymoon period, and there is, you feel better. But the thing is, when you relapse so many times, the honeymoon period doesn't mean anything to you anyways either. You still are cautious. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that it also hasn't been sunshine and rainbows for the last 3.5 years. Marriage is still marriage. Raising kids and having kids is still responsibility. You still have to pay bills. You still have to show up for family functions. Well, I guess you don't have to, but you know, you, you still gotta participate in life. It's not like you quit drinking and you just can go sit on the lounge chair and live out the whatever, if that's your dream. But I think everybody listening knows what I'm talking about. Is that it's life's still life, and life's gonna have curveballs, and things are gonna happen, and you're gonna get in arguments, with your spouse, and um, things are gonna happen. And I'll tell you one thing that did happen was after a year I was sober, full year, and things couldn't be going better for me and my family, and um, we elected to have surgeries for my daughters on their feet, and one of them had complications, and ended up being a very big deal, for a year, and it was a massive challenge for me. Um, I ended up not drinking throughout the entire thing, and but I ended up putting on 50 pounds, from eating. I just shifted my coping from alcohol to sugar and bad food, greasy food, anything that would give me a dopamine escape release, from dealing with the situation. And it was a very hard year, would love to say that, like, I quit drinking and it was just fucking golden from there on out, and it wasn't the case. There was a lot of hard times that came, but I will say one thing is that, without the alcohol, it seems like everything is more manageable. No problem can't really be solved. As long as I'm 100% there and my wife is doing what she's always done, which is being 100% there, and we're just committed to getting through whatever comes our way, and with us, our marriage, and and um, I've had to process a lot of guilt, from so many different things during all those drinking years, and there's had to be, like, sort of a process of, like, letting go of some of it, and understanding that, like, I can only do what I can do from here on, to try and provide the kind of life for my girls that that they should have, give them the most experiences they can have in their life, and just try and they were dealt a really brutal hand, and like we can they can live life one way or they can live it another, and that really comes down to me and my wife and how we go about it. And we want the most for them. We want the most for ourselves, and we want them right there with us for as long as they're going to be. So yeah, again, I wanted to share my story. I feel like I know there are other people out there that are dealing with their own issues. Probably some. It's not a competition, but I'm sure. I'm not even sure, because I've been in rehab facilities, and I've talked with plenty of people, and they tell me their story, and I look at mine and I chuckle a bit and go, Jesus Christ, I thought I had a bad. This my story doesn't even. I guess the words compare. It's not about comparing. It's that you know that saying of, whenever you think think you have it the worst, there's always someone who, or whenever you think you have it bad, there's always someone who has it worse out there. And I have lived that, and that's a fact, because I've heard plenty of stories firsthand from people telling me the honest truth about their lives, and I'm very thankful for the problems that I have in mind. And so, yeah, I just wanted to really lay it out there, and hopefully, again, I decided I've been thinking about trying to coach. I've been thinking about helping people for probably at least 2 years now. It's been in the back of my mind. I've had some reasons why I haven't really been able to pursue it, but there's some stability in our home right now, and it has been for long enough to where I feel like I can pursue this with support and legitimacy. And so yeah, I'm essentially out here now trying to present that same message and show that there is a path of sobriety that can be fun, exciting, and you can connect with a lot of people out there that don't look at sobriety as a sentence, like a life sentence. They look at it as a life gift, of being able to really live life to its fullest. So yeah, if I can get my story out there, and if it resonates with anybody, that's looking for help, that is what I'm out to do, is assist people, and finding the same current success that I'm having in my journey with this all. So that'll wrap it up.